I work the night shift, and my wife works during the day. Her workplace is mostly male-dominated, so she spends a lot of time with her male colleagues, though there are also some women in supporting roles, like in the office or the spare parts department. We've been together since we were teenagers, and now, in our 40s with kids, things are a bit different. I won't go into the details of our family life, but it's important to mention that she recently started working in this new field, which has led to new workplace relationships. Lately, she's been spending more time with her female coworkers after work, not just occasionally. Her shifts end around 5 o'clock, but she often comes home much later, sometimes around 7 or 8. A few times, she's even stayed at one of her colleagues' homes after drinking, which caught me off guard because she's usually pretty responsible and doesn't drink in public. But for now, I'm not overly concerned. Last night, I was at home, not working, and went to bed at my usual time, around 3 a.m. I woke up to the glow of her phone screen. I couldn't tell if she was texting or browsing the internet, and she didn't seem to be hiding it, so I didn't think much of it. But then, she got up and started getting ready for work, even though her shift doesn't begin until 8 o'clock. When I asked her about it, she said she was going for a walk with some colleagues, which seemed odd. She works as a diesel engine repair mechanic and was dressed much more nicely than I'd expect for a walk, or even a regular workday. She left around 4 o'clock, probably getting to her friend's place by 4:30. It was still dark, drizzling, and about 45 degrees Fahrenheit outside, which didn't seem like ideal walking weather, especially for Arizona, where raincoats aren't common. Plus, she drives a truck and I drive a car. At 5 o'clock, I sent her a text asking if I could use the truck for a dump run, but she didn't reply. So, 15 minutes later, I called her. She told me they were still walking, and then asked me to pick up the truck from her workplace. If it hadn't been raining, I might have wondered if her hair was wet from a second shower. I tend to overanalyze things. I have a unique way of thinking and sometimes struggle with social cues, so I'm wondering if I'm just reading too much into this. I decided to confront her, so I asked to see her phone. She tried to distract me and insisted on seeing mine, which I handed over along with the password. I had nothing to hide, as I rarely have personal time, let alone see other people. However, when I checked her active messages, everything seemed normal. Nothing had been deleted. But when I went to find a specific conversation that had caught my attention earlier, it was mysteriously gone. Feeling suspicious, I called the person I had been concerned about, hoping to see his name pop up. I handed her the phone and asked to see their text conversation. She acted like nothing was wrong, but I pointed out that she had messaged him both before leaving home and after returning, even though she had claimed to be in Vegas. Instead of explaining, she seemed confused, as if she couldn't understand why the phone company had stored their messages. Disappointed, she went upstairs and refused to talk any further. Feeling hurt and betrayed, I decided to pack up and leave. I told her what I was planning and left after packing my things. Now, let me share what I learned from the police investigator about handling situations like this. First, he told me that in cases of minor offenses, the guilty party rarely admits everything. Even if they confess to part of it, they tend to hold back the most important details, so don't expect a full admission, especially in cases of ongoing infidelity. When you find yourself in this kind of situation, it's a major breach of trust, and you'll need to make some tough decisions, possibly even legal ones. Essentially, you're trying to gather more information for later. He also recommended starting the confrontation by implying that you know more than they realize, which might encourage them to talk. The key is to get to the truth, so don't reveal how much you already know. Think of it like a high-stakes poker game. You don't want to show your hand just yet. He also pointed out that, even if you search their phone, don't expect to find anything. It's probably hidden or already deleted, unless they're not very clever. Most people who are guilty tend to hide evidence, anticipating that a confrontation will come. Your goal is to show that there's a lack of text messages and call logs, which can serve as proof. It's essential to request records from your telecom provider to check for any gaps in dates and times. If there's a noticeable absence of communication with a particular person, it suggests they were together during those moments. Make them believe you know more than you do while keeping some details to yourself. Getting direct evidence of their wrongdoing can be tough. When you confront them, ask for access to their phone. They'll likely resist and demand to see your phone, throwing out similar accusations. Be prepared for them to stare at you with suspicion. My wife did the same when I asked to see her phone. She claimed she didn't know my password and insisted that I reveal it. Keep in mind that guilty parties are more concerned about what you might find on their phone than what you could find on yours. Pay attention to how willing they are to share information that matters to you. In my case, my wife didn't show much interest at all. She barely looked at the messages, didn't check the photo gallery, where questionable content usually shows up, and was more focused on the phone in my hand as I casually scrolled through a list of harmless text conversations. She even said, "See? I don't know what you think I'm up to." To continue my investigation, I opened the phone app, dialed the suspect's number, and tapped on the SMS icon. To my surprise, there were no messages. I went back to the contact, showed it to her, and asked why the messages were missing. She told me they'd never communicated. I disagreed and pointed out that in just the past month, she had exchanged over 900 messages with him. I pressed her for an explanation about where those messages had gone. At first, she tried to act innocent, but I could tell she probably knew I was right. Finally, she reluctantly admitted she had deleted them but didn't give me the whole truth. It turned out those messages were about her wanting a divorce, something she wasn't ready to share with me yet. I didn't reveal how much I actually knew or how deep my suspicions ran. Instead, I gave just enough information to show I was confident and had a solid understanding of the situation. Knowing the exact number of texts was key. It served as undeniable evidence that I wasn't bluffing when I said I knew something. This kind of reaction is a typical sign of guilt. When someone gets caught in a tough spot, they often try to deflect, using various tactics to avoid responsibility. They might offer explanations about where they were, but it's important to dig deeper into the details of those explanations. If their story sounds vague or forced, keep pressing for more information. Many lies are thrown together without much thought and can easily unravel under further questioning. While they might tell you they went to a bar with friends, the details will likely be sparse, like what kind of drink they had or who won the game of darts. Innocent spouses usually share the small details of a fun evening with friends willingly. Guilty ones, on the other hand, might get defensive or wonder why you're so interested in their activities. Keep in mind, they're already anticipating a confrontation and likely have a version of events in their head, thinking about how an innocent person would respond. This is true even when they try to draw attention away from themselves. When our oldest daughter had a conflict with my wife, she later told me there were two reasons behind it. First, she wanted to steer the conversation in the right direction if our daughter came to me. Second, people who are guilty often believe that by making themselves the center of attention, they'll eventually shift the focus away from their own behavior. In hindsight, I realized I made a mistake by not asking my daughter what exactly led her to think that way. I should have asked her to explain the specific things she said that made her come to that conclusion. Looking back, I should have taken the initiative to call my daughter myself. When accused by someone else, an innocent spouse would likely be eager to offer unsolicited, detailed explanations because they have nothing to hide. Let's consider how someone who's innocent would behave. They might feel a bit annoyed by the request to see their phone, still holding on to the expectation of privacy. But in the end, they would likely hand it over without much hesitation. They'd probably be genuinely confused at first. Honest people don't try to mislead or deceive others. It's also worth mentioning that the most convincing lies often contain elements of truth. For example, my wife claimed she had spent time alone at a tattoo parlor getting sketches. But when she came back home, she didn't have any sketches with her, nor did she take pictures of them. She didn't say much about the experience either, just showed me some design ideas she had found online. She said her appointment was at 1 p.m., but she left our house at 11:30 a.m., so it only took her about 45 minutes to get there. When she returned home, it was around 6 p.m. While I do believe she went to the tattoo parlor that day, I'm starting to suspect she might have visited his house beforehand. Maybe they spent time together and that tattoo appointment was a convenient excuse, a potential alibi. Perhaps they even had lunch and had some deep conversations about moral theology before she returned home. That's when I decided to get to the bottom of things. It's important to realize that a simple alibi doesn't always explain everything. She mentioned encountering bad traffic but didn't give me any specifics, like saying she saw a blue Honda overturned or anything concrete. She also told me she went to Home Depot to look for lifting belt rings, but she came back empty-handed, suggesting the trip wasn't successful. There are other details she shared with me, but they're not coming to mind right now. I'll report them when I can. She still maintains her relationship with him, and it seems unlikely things will work out between us. I've come to terms with my role in the situation. My anger issues have certainly played a big part in her distancing herself from me. But I'm actively working on improving myself and have made progress. Even though she hasn't admitted to cheating, I'm open to forgiveness, acknowledging my part in all of this. She said our relationship has no future, but she's offered cohabitation for the sake of the kids. I have reservations about the terms of cohabitation, though, as it seems more like a compromise driven by her own hidden fears. In response, I told her I'd be open to a divorce if that's what she really wants. But since she hasn't brought it up, I take that as a clear sign she's not ready for that. Maybe she's starting to soften her stance. For evidence, we recently went out for dinner with the kids, and she was friendly. We had a pleasant conversation and maintained eye contact. At that moment, I honestly thought her heart was starting to thaw, but things took a turn. On the way home, she made a subtle remark, as if to remind herself that she no longer loved me. People often say it's easy to walk away from a cheater, but when there are children involved, the pain of betrayal cuts deep. The life I thought I knew was tied to our shared existence. Those who think I'm showing weakness might consider themselves victorious, but they don't fully understand the emotional toll. However, this morning, I woke up to find her gone. I know where she is, even without knowing where he is. I know his address. Earlier, I took photos of her truck in his garage, though I'm not entirely sure why I felt compelled to do that. Maybe it was to gauge her emotional state. When I arrived at their place, I first noticed only his car in the driveway. But then I spotted her car nearby. Without knowing I was there, she texted me, asking if we needed any household supplies, like garbage bags. I responded that we were out of groceries and, as an opening, asked if she could pick up some cream for me. I acted confident about her location, but didn't react right away. Then I saw him drive out of the driveway, and her car was parked in reverse. It was clear they had left together. I walked up to the door and rang the bell, but no one answered. Trying to get a conversation going, I messaged her, asking if she had received a letter I had sent. She said she hadn't seen it, so I shared its contents with her. Afterward, she said she was willing to talk about it later. When she later texted me saying she was at Costco, I immediately replied that I knew she wasn't there. About 45 minutes later, I got a message with a photo of a Costco building. It was clear she had just arrived and was making up a story. Not wanting to be persuaded, I asked her to send a photo of her truck if she wanted me to believe her. She replied calmly, saying she didn't care about convincing me. At that moment, I had to give her some credit. She might have been trying to shield me from more emotional pain. Maybe she feared my reaction, and I couldn't help but feel a little regretful. But, in the end, the constant lies hurt more than the raw truth ever could. In an attempt to confirm her story, she sent me a photo of herself inside a Costco store. Despite receiving this evidence, I chose not to reply, letting the weight of her deception linger in silence. Internally, I'm in turmoil, reflecting on the moments when, driven by anger, I considered leaving her and our children. While I'm determined not to repeat that kind of behavior, I must admit that I'm now at a point where I'm ready to find a way out of this situation. Yesterday, I had a consultation with an attorney to discuss the current state of things. Following my therapist's advice, I made a conscious decision to avoid rushing into any decisions while my emotions are still running high. Instead, I've chosen to take a step back, think carefully, and consider my options. Right now, my soon-to-be ex-wife and I continue to live together for the sake of our children. It's not easy, financially. It's a burden for me to support the household while she's involved with another man. It's even more complicated by the fact that she maintains a separate group chat with our kids, using it to feed them false information, like claiming she went out drinking with someone named Amelia at 4 a.m. I realized that she was about to leave for work soon, with only a few hours before her shift started. Since bars are typically closed at that time, it became clear that her story about going out for drinks was pure fiction. What concerns me most, though, is the impact her lies are having on our youngest child, who has high-functioning autism. He tends to research the opening hours of places like bars and gyms, and he's starting to catch on to her web of deceit. If she can continue deceiving me without facing any consequences, these lies are now affecting our children as well. But after a few quiet nights, I've come to a point where her actions no longer keep me up at night. I've already consulted with a lawyer who told me that with shared custody, the alimony I'll have to pay will only be $142 a month. My wife doesn't want to sell our family home, and it's clear she can't afford to buy it for me or acquire it on her own. However, my lawyer explained that if I choose to sell the house, it will definitely be sold. This puts me in a somewhat tricky position. I have much more in savings than she does, which means my assets could be at risk of being divided equally. Still, there are investments and company shares that haven't fully matured yet. The lawyer reassured me that these assets can be protected due to some uncertainty around them. He also suggested I could use the house as leverage in negotiations to secure my assets. If I contribute only half of the house payments until our children turn 18, I could negotiate an equal share of future assets. By playing this card, I might be able to preserve my savings. So, the situation has essentially turned into a real estate negotiation. On a personal level, I have to admit that I succumbed to the stress of sleep deprivation and overwhelming grief, which led me to attempt reconciliation with my unfaithful wife. I begged her, acting in desperation and without self-respect. About 2 weeks ago, I reached my breaking point and had to leave work early because I couldn't focus. At that moment, I hoped that her car would still be parked outside our house and that perhaps a spark of affection for me would reignite in her heart. Looking back now, I see how important it is never to let myself appear foolish in situations like that. I tried to start a conversation with her, but my efforts were in vain, and I couldn't help but feel pathetic. It seemed like my pleas went unanswered. Sunday came and went, and I had no particular plans. I told her I wouldn't be home until the workday began, giving her time to be with the kids while I was away. After buying pizza for the kids, she left again. Feeling lost and unsure of what to do, I sat in the car, aimlessly browsing internet forums, trying to distract myself. For reasons I can't entirely explain, I ended up downloading Tinder and creating a profile. My intention wasn't to find a fling. I just mindlessly swiped left on every profile that came up. However, I did strike up a conversation with one girl, though I wasn't particularly interested. The next morning, after work, I came across another profile and, despite my uncertainty, impulsively swiped right. To my surprise, we instantly connected, and she greeted me with the message, "Hello, handsome." It was incredibly uplifting to receive such kind words at a time when I needed them most. We began chatting, and the conversation flowed effortlessly. We even had a couple of drinks together, and before I knew it, Tuesday night turned into an impromptu date. Realizing that this relationship might have the potential to become something more, I felt the need to be open about my current situation. Honesty is important to me, especially when starting any new relationship. Interestingly, she too had experienced infidelity and had been divorced for some time, but she was eager to start dating again. When the night came to a close, I walked her to her car, and we shared a kiss. It's worth mentioning that my wife has already begun the divorce process, so we are no longer legally bound. The thought of this woman and the possibility of a fresh start gave me a sense of relief, allowing me to sleep peacefully for the first time in weeks. Perhaps, in some divine mercy, God sent someone my way to remind me that I am still worthy of love and appreciation. This encounter renewed my hope for the future, and even if nothing more comes from it, I'm grateful for the brief happiness she brought into my life. I know things are moving quickly, but I also recognize that my marriage has been unstable for years. Divorce has crossed my mind countless times, though I never took concrete steps toward it. I must admit, I didn't make much of an effort to salvage the marriage. Her affair was the final tipping point that pushed us to this point. Looking back, I can't help but think that perhaps it was necessary for both of us. Since neither of us was truly happy, and neither had the courage to end things sooner. Reflecting on all of this, I wonder if I would have been tempted by infidelity had I been in her shoes. The fear of betraying my partner kept me distant from other women. But now, in the aftermath of all this, the memories my wife and I once shared seem distant and faded, almost like the memories of someone in the final stages of life. When death approaches, the grief is immediate, but it also brings a swift awareness of its inevitability. Similarly, I feel like I've become acutely aware of the end of this chapter in my life, and while it's painful, it's also a form of closure. Today, I took a major step forward. I made an advanced payment to officially start the divorce proceedings. As a result, our living arrangement will likely end soon. My son and I have decided to find a new place together, away from the tension. He doesn't speak to his mother anymore because of her affair, and I'm planning to sell the house and claim my fair share of the assets, despite her objections. The reality is that she can't afford the mortgage on her own and won't have enough from the divorce settlement to buy me out. The initial costs of filing for divorce amounted to $2,500, but despite the pain, I believe the payoff will be worth it. Day trading, which I've been honing for years, is no longer just a hobby. It's a skill that's increasing my profits. I plan to make even bigger moves in the future. Additionally, I've long dreamed of owning a 1979 Fiat Spider convertible, something I could never justify as a married man. But now, without those constraints, I'm finally free to pursue it. Once everything settles, I'll buy the car I've always wanted. I even joked with my lawyer about getting a custom license plate that reads, "Damn, it's good to be a gangster," inspired by a song I've always liked. I can't help but wonder how my wife will react when she receives the divorce summons and realizes I'm serious about selling the house. The irony is, we'll both walk away with enough money to start fresh in new homes. She might even move in with her family, while I'll move on with my life. Ironically, my wife, who betrayed me, is now trying to strike up casual conversations with me over text. She messaged me about evaporative coolers from Home Depot, which reminded me of our failed attempt to buy one during a winter sale. I've managed to keep a neutral and unresponsive stance toward her, ignoring her messages as best as I can. She also asked when I'd be home, mentioned that we'd be living in separate rooms, and even wished me a good time at the water park tomorrow, a trip I had planned with the kids. By the way, fellow dads, water parks seem to be a hotspot for single moms post-divorce. Today, my ex-wife texted me saying that she'd be renting her truck, which will cost her $730 a month. As a result, our eldest child will no longer have access to a reliable vehicle with 220,000 miles on it. I can't lie, there's a small sense of satisfaction in knowing she's facing the consequences of her actions. Additionally, I had a long conversation with my sister, who shared some interesting information about the man my wife is now seeing. Apparently, this guy has been through 4 failed marriages. My sister told me that he has a history of attaching himself to women, draining their finances, and then disappearing when they're financially strained. Though it's hard to believe, my sister passed this on to me, and I replied that if this is true, I hope he burns through her quickly so we can finalize our divorce. I also told her I hoped their relationship lasts until I get the paperwork finished and am officially out of this situation. I later spoke to my wife about her current plans. She told me that she intended to return the truck as part of her effort to refinance the house. She admitted that due to financial issues, she couldn't handle both the truck payments and the new loan amount. This, strangely enough, aligns with my own plan of moving out of our shared home. I made it clear that I was looking for a new place because I wasn't about to stay in a house where she was freely carrying on an affair. I told her I intended to transfer the house to her, but I required a buyout. I have assets that she would need to surrender to obtain my share, although it still wouldn't be enough to cover what I feel is fair. Regardless, the cost of leaving quickly still seems manageable, and I'm aiming to resolve this while she's still cooperating. Experience has shown that as time passes and physical separation increases, people start undervaluing the need for fair division. Even though she wasn't thrilled about not getting a portion of the liquid assets, I reassured her that she would have full control of the house. She could either keep it until our children grow up or invite her boyfriend to live there, whatever she chose. The decision is entirely hers, though I remain cautious and watchful. Tomorrow is a significant day for me. I'll be purchasing a new home and working with my lawyer to get the legal documents in order. Those who know my routine are aware that after 19 years with my ex-wife, who decided to have an affair, something I discovered in March, I initially tried a desperate, fruitless choose-me approach to save the relationship. But after speaking with a psychologist, I came to realize that my life would ultimately improve without her. That realization led me to find a rental house within walking distance of our current home, allowing the kids to come and go freely between both places. To simplify everything and make drop-offs and pickups easier, I've adjusted my work schedule. The move is set for tomorrow. I've already received the keys to the new place, and the utilities are all arranged. Fortunately, I'm financially stable enough to make this new chapter happen. I should also mention that I have an appointment with my lawyer to finalize the divorce paperwork. My soon-to-be ex-wife and I have agreed on the terms via email, and the lawyer will use this as the foundation for the legal documents. If everything goes according to plan, we should be able to sign everything at the meeting and then wait for the required waiting period. If all goes smoothly, I expect to receive the final divorce decree sometime between late June and early July. While it may not be exactly what I envisioned, I believe my mental well-being is worth it. As for my job, I still have some restricted shares that will vest in the future. Fortunately, our agreement specifies that my future ex-wife waives any claim to these shares if I remain in my current position. These shares could prove to be quite valuable, especially given the ongoing support I receive from the company, such as 30 days of leave and short-term disability benefits. I see no reason to leave. This entire experience has only strengthened my loyalty to my employer. Thankfully, my future ex-wife has a well-paying job that keeps her above the poverty line, so I won't be required to pay spousal support. Additionally, with equal custody of the children and my coverage of their medical, dental, and vision insurance, my alimony obligations are only $142 per month for less than 5 years. We're currently in talks about possibly waiving this commitment altogether. Looking to the future, in 5 years, once the children are grown, I'll have saved enough to retire abroad at 47, instead of working until 70 here in the US. For too long, I felt trapped in my marriage, wasting money on extravagant houses and material possessions that brought me little real happiness. Living far away from my future ex-wife, on the other side of the world, has unexpectedly turned out to be a blessing. While my heart may be broken at the end of this marriage, I refuse to let it define me or steal my ability to love. I truly believe there's someone special out there for me, someone to whom I can trust my heart again, even if it means becoming vulnerable once more. Love and hope are powerful forces that should never fade, even after betrayal. During these tough times, I hold onto a quote that gives me comfort. However, we do not look back for a long time. We continue to move forward, opening new doors and embracing new experiences. Our curiosity propels us onto uncharted paths. It reminds me not to dwell too long on the past, but to focus on the future, exploring new possibilities and embracing the unknown. Curiosity lights the way, leading us to fresh opportunities and exciting journeys. Having made the decision to start over, I'm taking steps to fulfill my wish list. In a few hours, I'll embark on a trip abroad. Since July is dedicated to self-discovery, I've planned a visit to Thailand. As I navigate single life again, it's essential for me to reconnect with parts of myself that I've lost touch with. At this stage, I'm focused on new experiences, adding them to my ever-growing list. When my future ex-wife reaches out, I respond on my terms, sometimes taking several days. While the divorce process continues, I prioritize my well-being and ensure everything is moving forward. The financial and property division has been resolved, leaving only custody and alimony to be decided. My lawyer advised against accepting her unreasonable proposal, which wouldn't be approved by any judge. Instead, we made our own offer. In my proposal, I emphasized that the children are old enough now to have a say in custody matters. I've also secured a place within walking distance of her house, so the kids can visit easily. It's worth noting that after I moved out, she wasted no time in moving her boyfriend into a new place. While I admit this bothered me at first, I now find it almost comical, like something out of a cliché. As for my trip, I must admit that someone else is joining me. A new girl. Surprisingly, the cause of my sleepless nights isn't the pain from my spouse's infidelity, but rather the 14-hour time difference. For those who are still struggling, I offer simple advice. Don't give up. Despite the challenges we face, it's crucial to keep moving forward and maintain momentum. After a long process, I'm happy to announce that my divorce has been officially finalized. In short, I made the difficult decision to leave my wife after she began an affair, signaling her desire to end our marriage. Sadly, the custody and alimony arrangements weren't as favorable as I had hoped, but I was realistic enough to know that the ideal outcome might be more of a wish than a reality. Nonetheless, I negotiated with her on the alimony to secure a better future for our teenage sons. I convinced her to allocate half of the alimony toward their college savings. Given that our children are now teenagers, her suggestion that they spend weekends with both of us seemed reasonable. They're nearly adults and should have the freedom to make their own choices. With just a few final details to work out, the custody agreement now requires my ex to handle the children's school transportation. However, this situation worked in my favor, as I was able to secure a travel position at my job, which allows me to work about 15 hours of overtime each week to cover my food expenses. Fortunately, this overtime doesn't factor into the alimony calculations in our jurisdiction. I also made adjustments to my work insurance policy by removing her as a beneficiary, which resulted in some additional savings for me. In fact, it's possible that the insurance she receives through her job now surpasses the alimony payments she gets from me. I recently discovered that she's dealing with health issues, including breast cancer, which only adds more complexity to her already difficult situation. Given the circumstances, it's hard not to see some poetic justice in the fact that she's facing these health challenges after her affair. I realize that may sound harsh, but I believe in being honest. In light of these developments, I updated my life insurance plan to ensure she won't benefit from it. Just the other day, I ran into her in person while I was helping with some medical expenses for our child. Surprisingly, the encounter didn't have much of an emotional impact on me. I'm focused on moving forward and trying to live a positive life, free from negative influences. My advice to those going through a similar situation is simple. Don't lose hope. There's always light at the end of the tunnel, and better days are ahead. I won't deny that in the beginning, I acted disrespectfully, begging her to come back, displaying insecurity and lack of composure. It even led to me taking a temporary leave from work, along with other personal issues. But I can confidently say that survival is possible, even if it's difficult. Karma seems to be at work now. I've always believed in justice, and I feel like people ultimately face the consequences of their actions. I recently found out that my ex-wife was fired from her job. Ironically, it was the same place where she met her lover. In a way, this feels fitting, given her history of damaging marriages and getting involved with colleagues inappropriately. Looking at her past, it's possible that circumstances were seen differently, but the truth is, she had 2 affairs and her partner was also married. Later, I found out she was diagnosed with breast cancer and is undergoing treatment. After losing her job, she's struggling financially. It also came to light that her older lover convinced her to sell the house and disappeared with the money. While the children say she's in an emotional breakdown, I can't feel any sympathy for her. She made this choice for herself. As she faces the consequences, I'm building a new relationship with someone who truly values and loves me.